Welcome, Swagatham, Vanakkam. Welcome to the second session in understanding temptations and the strategies by which temptations may be faced and overcome. In the previous video, we examined the universal aspect of temptations. We also found out that temptations originate in the interface between external impressions and our internal equipment, the relationship between the two being mediated by our five senses, and the fact that we are given an additional faculty to ensure that this filtering process is done in a manner that is beneficial to the health and wholeness of our personality, and that faculty is reason. And if reason is exercised properly, then we can ensure that evil temptations or temptations to do evil, temptations to corrupt ourselves and to cripple our personality and to spoil the felicity of our life can be overcome. We also found out that attaining self-mastery is the prime goal proposed in all philosophies and all spiritual traditions. Actually, this is something in common between philosophy and spirituality. And we also examined in the previous unit the Stoic prescriptions as to how temptations may be understood and overcome. Now, I also made a mention there, without developing the thought any further, that this is common to all religious traditions as well as philosophies. I'll say something more about it before I go on to examine further dimensions. Now, an idea that's very central to Hinduism is the doctrine of Maya. The doctrine of Maya doesn't urge us to belittle the world of external realities. It only alerts us to the possibility, in fact, the truth, that we could be seriously mistaken in judging the truth, the verity, the meaning, the significance of these external impressions or external stimulants. For example, the illustration of a rope is often used. If you happen to see a rope lying on the road that you happen to walk, and it is in dim light or twilight, and there is every chance that you mistake that to be a snake, and therefore you run away for your life screaming for help, whereas it was a harmless object lying there. The converse is also possible. A snake is lying on your way, on your path, and you think it's only a piece of rope, because the sense impressions that fall upon you under the dim light conditions enable you only to come to the conclusion that it's only a piece of rope. Perhaps you don't see the subtle movements the snake is making because there isn't enough light, and you just go and take it and in order to maybe to throw it to the side of the road, if at all you do that, or you just cross over and the snake bites you. So the need to be aware of the fact that the external impressions that fall upon us all the time should not be taken on face value, and that we need a reliable, valid perspective from which to evaluate these external impressions. And Hinduism posits that all the phenomenal elements of our life, all the things that constitute the external world from which these mental impressions come to us, they are the elaborated, expanded, varied expressions of the one, Brahma, the ultimate oneness of things, the primal unity, in the words of Nietzsche in The Birth of Tragedy. Therefore, as the divine passes into the medium of time, like a ray of light which is colorless, passing through a prism, breaking into a display of colors, the 7 colors that constitute the color of the rainbow, Vibji or violet, indigo, blue, green, orange, yellow, red. So also, when this one, which is the ultimate reality, enters the framework of time and space, it has to necessarily express itself in terms of variety, diversity, plurality. And to that extent, the expression of the one within the framework of time and space, which is necessarily varied, will also contain within itself a certain element, a certain margin of distortion, deception, scope for misconception, misunderstanding, wrong interpretation, and therefore there is a need to be vigilant of this. And the doctrine of Maya urges us to be circumspect so that we don't attach total credence or absolute passion to all the things that we see in the phenomenal world. Nothing that you see in the world is ultimate. Only one thing is ultimate, that is the eternal one, the Brahma. And all these manifestations in the phenomenal world, after their time is over, they have to return to the state of primal unity, when all of them will attain oneness with the Brahma, and that's the experience of moksha. This roughly, as far as I can understand, I could be wrong, but this is what I've understood, the doctrine of Maya. And I find it very welcome in the sense that complete identification with the phenomenal world poses serious problems, particularly problems in divisive understanding and conflictual relationship. If you understand the same thing differently, for example, take God. Now we know that all the disputes and conflicts among religions pertains ultimately to God. Though God has nothing to do with it, but all the fights are about God. Now, the idea of God, which is transcendental, which is beyond the framework of time and space, is one. And about the transcendental God, there can be no doubt, no dispute, no religious quarrel, no communal riot. But when that idea of God enters time and space, it embraces, the infinite embraces finitude. And diversity, variety, contradiction, all are inevitable in the realm of finitude. Finitude means that which has limitations. God does not suffer any limitations. God is eternal, immortal, omniscient, omnipresent. That is to say, God is infinite, and what is infinite cannot suffer from any limitation whatsoever. That's the simple meaning of the infinite. What is finite has all limitations. It's subject to all limitations. Human beings as finite. That's we are subject to the limitation of death. What is born has to die, because birth means the eternal entering the domain of time and space, accepting the limitations inherent in that matrix, and therefore undergoing all the limitations, difficulties, obstacles, hindrances, and privations that are natural to the state of finitude. So, whatever we see in the phenomenal world exists in the world of finitude, not in the world of infinite. But when God the eternal, God the infinite, enters this domain of the finite, what happens? The infinite has to take on the garb or the dress of the finite. The infinitude accepts the insult, if you like, of finitude. But human beings are unaware of it. And because of our finitude, we attach total passion to the limited idea of God, which alone is possible in the world of finitude, because infinite understanding in the world of finitude is a contradiction in terms. It's simply not possible. That is why various religions are required. Every religion is a phenomenon or a product of man's finitude, and therefore the understanding of God in every religious tradition has to be finite. So, understanding the infinite in the framework or in the light of finitude is an insult to the infinite, and yet that's the only way it can happen in this world. And therefore, the only way to adjudicate between these two incompatibles, the incompatibles of the infinite and the finite, God and human beings, and man's understanding of God, which is also finite. God is infinite, but our understanding of God will necessarily be finite. It will be limited, it will never be complete. And yet everyone believes that his or her understanding of God is the only thing that is relevant. All other understandings are wrong. This is an aberration of our finitude, which we consider as the ultimate truth. So it is necessary that various religions come into existence from time to time, spread over a long period of history, so that a sequence of finite understandings of God can be then sequenced, put together, and a more complete idea of God, and therefore a more truthful experience of God can be arrived at by those who are interested, those who are free to do so. But unfortunately, again because of the aberrations inherent in human finitude, human beings create a particular religious tradition based on a fragmentary, limited, childish understanding of God, God the infinite, God the omnipresent, God the omnipotent, so on and so forth, God the infinite, and every religion, every tradition, every church, every denomination, every abomination insists that my little understanding of God alone is absolute and final, whatever you are saying is wrong. Now, this is the root of all religious conflicts. And wherever religions generate conflict, you must understand that what is operative is not God, but temptations regarding God. So ultimately, communal rights are not rights between gods. Communal rights are conflicts between two forms of temptations, that's all. Except that these temptations pertain to the idea of God. I hope I have made this idea clear. In case more explanations are needed, please let me know. Make your notings in the comments box and I'll be happy to explain as best I can. So this is by far the idea that we have covered. So that's of Hinduism. Now as far as Buddhism is concerned, Buddha says this world of samsara, it can only give you suffering, dukkha, and even your pursuit of pleasure will necessarily end up in suffering, and therefore the only right approach to life is to transcend or go beyond this world of samsara, this world of dukkha, and you attain nirvana and you liberate yourself from the coils of your mortal finitude, and you become one with the eternal. Well, Buddha did not have any idea of the divine. Buddhism is a very interesting, very challenging phenomenon from the religious point of view. It is a religion without God. Subsequently, of course, Buddhas were elevated to the realm of God and all that. This happens in the formation of religion. So then, of course, I very briefly detailed the Stoic response to the experience of temptation, identified 4 different strategies. I will not repeat. In this context, I want to say something in this unit. I want to say something more specific about the temptations of Jesus and his way of dealing with it. I find, interestingly, the Stoic pattern very beautifully reflected in Jesus' approach to temptations and his way of overcoming them. And I've already given some indications in the previous unit. But let me give a few additional insights. The Stoics believed that we have to be very discerning as well as ruthless in dealing with external impressions that are evil, external impressions that are inimical to our well-being as human beings, external impressions that would drag us or tempt us along the wrong path, resulting in the corruption and desecration of our personality and in making us forget the real meaning and purpose of our life, and thereby does enormous harm to the individual concerned who succumbs to it. So, Stoic philosophy, which is committed to the dignity and greatness of being human, which is something that I greatly appreciate in Stoic philosophy. By the way, Stoic philosophy has its origin in the Greek context, and the 3 outstanding names in this context, the real originators of the Stoic philosophy are Zeno, Z-E-N-O, Cleanthes, Cleanthes, and Chrysippus. Yes, Chrysippus, yes, Chrysippus, Chrysippus. Zeno, Cleanthes, and Chrysippus. This began about 200 years before Jesus Christ. So, when Jesus Christ was alive and pursuing his public ministry, the atmosphere was somewhat redolent of Stoic philosophical ideas and approaches. So, no one can claim that Jesus was completely ignorant of all these things. After all, those days, Palestine was under Roman domination. And one thing that history teaches us is that imperialism has a good aspect, namely, imperialism makes culture spread. And when culture spread, it results in the cross pollination of ideas. And therefore, even though people are unfortunately dominated, subjugated, their freedom is compromised, ultimately, in the long analysis, they are also beneficiaries in the sense that the kind of philosophical reach they otherwise would have missed is also somehow garnered by them, even if that is not the intention of the conqueror, the colonizer, who does what he does out of crass self-interest, but it has got this unwitting, healthy byproduct of a certain degree of philosophical, cultural refinement or ennoblement coming into the people who are colonized. I am in no way advocating a justification of colonialism. I am totally opposed to the domination of one people by another. I am only making a historical observation. This has happened in history, and imperial adventures, conquests have played a big role in facilitating the cross-pollination of cultures and the exchange of ideas, information. It has even contributed to the development of science and later on technology. This is a historical fact which nobody can gainsay, nobody can question or debate or doubt. So, the Stoics believed that the best strategy is to deal with these negative or destructive, alluring temptations at the threshold itself. Therefore, do not give any time for these external impressions to influence you. For example, the Stoics believed that the danger point comes in the interface between you and the external impression when you simply stop and ask the question, suppose I give in to this, what will happen? What is the consequence? What can I gain out of it? What will I lose? So on the balance, should I go this way on? Stoics believe that if you undertook this kind of an exercise, you will surely fall into the trap. The only thing to do, whether you like it or not, it may seem unpalatable to the modern liberal kind of a hedonistic culture. Why should we be so ascetic? Why can't we experiment? So if you have that kind of approach, necessarily you will fall. So that's the Stoic thinking. It's not my thinking. I'm only telling you what they believed and what they practiced. So they believed that these tempting external impressions have to be cast out right at the threshold. And that's exactly what Jesus taught. Exactly, ditto. In fact, he puts it more dramatically. And I quoted that passage in the previous video where Jesus says, if your right eye offends you, pluck it out. Because after all, these negative promptings, these seductions, these tempting impressions are coming into you through your eye. When Jesus says, pluck out your eye that offends you, it doesn't mean literally, it means metaphorically, naming, deal with those impressions mercilessly right at the beginning. Do not allow them any entry into you. Don't consider them. Don't weigh the pros and cons. You are in a position to know that this particular prospect, this way that you are tempted to go, holds no good. It's not that you don't know. Everybody knows. By the way, it's not because we do not know that we take the wrong path. It's often in full knowledge that we take the wrong paths. So, no one can really offer the excuse of ignorance in acting in self-destructive ways, self-corrupting ways. We have enough knowledge to decide what is right and wrong. It is not knowledge that we need or lack. It is honesty with ourselves, it's a better understanding of ourselves and a better mastery over ourselves. Because if you lack that self-mastery, what happens is that we will align with these seductive forces ourselves and tempt ourselves. And what happens to Eve in the Garden of Eden, it may not be literally true, but it is figuratively, poetically very true, because Satan represents the external stimulation, and he only says, eat this fruit, the day you eat this fruit, you will be like God, your eyes will open. Eyes, very important, eyes are very important. And you will be like God. Thereafter, Eve takes over from Satan and she tempts herself. Read that passage, you'll see that what I'm saying is that's exactly what the Stoic philosopher said, and that's exactly what Jesus affirms in his teaching. So I see a perfect match between the teachings of Jesus Christ and the insight in Stoic philosophy. So Jesus advocates the same degree of ethical extremism, if you like, or intolerance. He wants people to be uncompromising in this respect. Now, Erich Fromm, in the book that I referred to in the previous video, Anatomy of Human Destructiveness, he gives an illustration for this. He says human life is like a game of chess. At the beginning, you have a million possibilities, but with each step you take, your scope is narrowing down. And the further you go, your scope narrows down, finally you reach the stalemate. You can't move left or right. He also says that and he is not a preacher, he is not a born-again Christian, he is a scientist. He says the only sensible strategy for life in such matters is to get a hold on it at the threshold. And actually he gives the illustration of a young boy, a young man, who invites a girl to go out for a film with him. She agrees. It's an illustration from Erich Fromm. And he says it's all right, let them go and see the film, but after that they should part. But that's not what he does. He says, well, why don't we have a meal together in my apartment? So at that point, the girl should have said, no, thank you. I'd rather go home and eat with my parents. Then the matter would have ended. She says, oh, okay, fine. And she debates within herself, should I go, should I not go? And she says, oh, what's the problem if I went? It's only a meal after all. We are good friends. After all, we have seen a film together. Why not share a meal? And she goes. And then he says the predictable happens. I don't want to go into those further details that Erich Fromm provides. You can read a structure of an anatomy of human destructiveness and get a full account of what Erich Fromm writes there. So this is the point, and this is the practical sense in being ruthless with temptations right at the threshold. And this is a teaching common to Stoicism and Jesus Christ. And also, Jesus, like the Stoics, says, do not weigh the pros and cons in this matter, because if you do, you will surely fall. For example, when Jesus was tempted by Satan, the last temptation was that Jesus was taken to the top of a mountain, and standing there, he was shown the nations, their wealth and their glory. And Satan told Jesus, if you fall down and worship me, I'll give you all of this. Now, suppose Jesus had stood there and debated within himself. After all, I have come to rescue the world from the tyranny of Satan, and this is the best option. It takes me only a fraction of a minute, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. I just bow down, worship Satan, then I get all this and I ask him to get lost. Isn't it a good bargain? Now, he will fall for it. Jesus doesn't weigh the pros and cons. If you look at the 3 temptations and how Jesus faced and overcame them, you'll find that Jesus doesn't weigh the pros and cons. He does not allow these stimulations to enter him. Right at the outset, in a flash of a second, he realizes that these are dangerous possibilities, and he edits them out, he blots them out, he deletes them, to use the computer language. That's the only way to deal with temptations. If you try to entertain them, and then you examine the pros and cons, and then you allow all these impressions to pile up inside of you, you become a dumping ground. Ultimately, you lose control over it altogether and you fall before you realize. This is the pragmatic approach. So, there is much in common between Jesus' outlook on temptations, the strategies that he recommends, and how the Stoics before Jesus, that's why I gave a very, very brief chronological perspective on Stoicism, starting with Zeno, Cleanthes, Chrysippus, and then from Greece it migrated to Rome and created great Stoic thinkers like Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, the great emperor of Rome, and the great philosopher Epictetus, to whom I have made references already. He was a slave, but a man of great philosophical capacity, and he was liberated, allowed to educate himself, and he became a great thinker. But when the next Caesar came, he was very intolerant of philosophers like some of our modern political leaders, because thinkers are a great threat to the stability of the country, urban naxals and all that. He was cast out of Rome. He had to spend the rest of his life elsewhere, not in Rome. So a man distinguishes himself as a philosopher and gets exiled from his city. So these are all very significant patterns. We need to understand that. So now these are the three outstanding Stoic thinkers in the Roman context, and they became possible because of the antecedents, philosophical antecedents in Greece, led by Zeno, Cleanthes, and Chrysippus. That is roughly the thing. So Jesus was not uninfluenced by these things, and I don't understand why Christians feel so apologetic, so unhappy, so uncomfortable with themselves when I say that Jesus was open to accepting good insights from any source and every source. What's wrong about it? What is wrong about us is that from birth onward, we have been trained in the most stupid manner, by which we are made to despise wisdom from any source other than our own. And admittedly, our fund of knowledge, our source of wisdom, is very, very poor, very bankrupt as of now. We have to change our ways. We have to become a little more liberated in the mind. We have to break off the shackles of prejudices and negativities if you want to survive as human beings in this world. I have to say this with a heavy heart, that all those negative prejudices and biases that we have been injected with, I too have been injected with this poison, serve only to cripple us and render us unfit for life, except as some low level creatures who happen to be walking on two legs, that's all. I'm deeply worried and immensely saddened by the predicament of the Christian community, particularly in Kerala. Well, I can only commend this to your consideration. So, ultimately, why are temptations important? Why is it spiritually, intellectually, philosophically so important to deal with these temptations, as the Stoics understood, as all spiritually enlightened people understand, as anyone who is concerned about and committed to human dignity and greatness is bothered about? Why is this such a big issue? It's an issue because the secret of being human rests here. Now, when we are born, and I hope I succeed in sharing this idea clearly with you, let me compose myself. When we are born, we are actually inferior to other animals. If you compare a newborn human baby with a newborn calf or a newborn cub, you will find that the newborn baby is physically inferior. And the human being, the early phase of life, continues to be in a state of incapacity and dependence for a much longer time. Which means that our life begins at the level of nature, but paradoxically at a level lower to other animals in terms of physical prowess, ability, skill, strength, etc. Even in terms of alertness and awareness, which are necessary for physical survival. But over a period of time, we are to excel all of these other creatures. I find this a very fascinating reality. When I look at animals, they are born superior to us, but over a period of time, we become far superior to them. How does that happen? It happens through our growth. This is why all of my thinking thinking is focused on human growth, human growth. Unfortunately, in religious thinking and religious cultures, it is not growth that constitutes the guiding idea, but mere survival. Whereas if you look at all spiritually enlightened people, they were not interested in survival. They were interested in growth towards perfection. Jesus said, "Be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect." Only if that goal makes sense to you, only if that goal attracts you, only if you think that that's a goal worth pursuing, will this theme of temptation and the strategy to overcome temptation and the means for attaining self-mastery will make any sense to you. If you just want to live like an animal, and if you read Tolstoy's On Life, it's a very, very simple book. Tolstoy has a fascinatingly simple style in writing about things important in life. Please read that book. You can download it from the net. On Life by Count Leo Tolstoy. And the theme that runs from start to finish in that book, very enjoyable, very profitable reading. So the theme that runs from start to finish is this: all of spirituality, all of philosophy is a struggle on the part of human beings to rise above the animal level and to attain a higher level of life, greater nobility, greater distinction, greater enlightenment, so on and so forth. And he says that this is the only value of religion. And a religiosity that doesn't daily contribute to it, it's not worth it. Please throw it aside. It's garbage. And I fully agree with him, because that's exactly what Jesus taught. All of Jesus' teaching, all of the teachings of anyone who is spiritually enlightened, is invariably characterized by a consistent, unwavering emphasis on every individual's duty to take good care of himself, herself. By taking care means daily enhancing one's worth, personal worth. That's called growth. Growth is always growth in worth. And it's that growth in worth that makes you a valuable asset to other people, a beneficial influence on other people, a source of encouragement and enrichment for other people, which is the only measure of your worth. The idea that you can measure your worth by the chair that you occupy, or the consumer goods that you enjoy, or the level of your spending, or where you are seen, who you are seen with, all this is utter nonsense. The only genuine worthwhile yardstick for measuring your worth is what is the enrichment, ennoblement, encouragement you can impart to a fellow human being. What is the beneficial impact you can have on the people with you and around you? That's the only valid yardstick. If you use that yardstick to measure people who go around, showing off their importance, they will cut a sorry figure. And it's highly important that the people of India develop, because after all we claim to be a spiritual people, and the whole world agrees that India is the land of spirituality. So let us adopt the spiritual yardstick, that we will measure the worth and importance or significance of people only in terms of the beneficial impact they have on their fellow human beings, according to the capacities, opportunities, graces God has given to them. If you use this one yardstick, there will be a massive change for the better in this country. So anyway, it's only in the case of the human need and human duty to daily and steadfastly progress towards the goal of perfection, with the perfection of God as a yardstick, as the model to shape ourselves after. Only to such people will the reality of temptation and the need to overcome temptations, to understand temptations clearly and aright, and to evolve appropriate strategies for dealing with temptations, and above all to attain this degree of impregnable self-mastery, seem a desirable goal. Others will think it's an unnecessary vexation. It's an unnecessary nuisance. Why bother about it? Live life bold and big. live life king size. What happens to these kings after having lived their life king size? Well, your guess is as good as mine. So it's a very important topic. And I have done these two videos in response to requests I have received from many individuals. Because after all, in the Lord's Prayer which Jesus taught, there is a section which says, lead us not into temptations, but deliver us from evil. But here I have to say that the problem is not so much that we are led into temptations, it is that we have not attained the understanding of this process, as well as developed the necessary self-mastery to deal beneficially with temptations. It is necessary that temptations come, because only when we are tempted or tested and proved do we have character of substance. In the end, let me conclude by referring to a very interesting short novel, an extended story, if you like, by the American author Mark Twain. The story of his work is, the title of his story is The Man That Tempted Hadley Burke. The Man That Tempted Hadley Burke. I don't want to go into details, but the thesis in that book, in that story, is that it is necessary and it is good to be tempted. Unless and until you're tempted and proved, you will never know what your moral fiber is like, how strong or weak you are. And therefore, the people of Hadley Burke, who had their motto, lead us not into temptation, changes that motto after going through a particular experience which is described in detail in that novel, which constitutes the substance of that work. They change the motto and they write, lead us into temptation. Because it's only by experiencing, encountering temptations, overcoming them, that we are able to define our spiritual personality, our personality in general, more clearly and strongly. And that's a beneficial experience. It's a necessary experience. At the same time, if we succumb to temptations, it can have a contrary effect. We can be more and more enfeebled, weakened, and enslaved by these temptations. And this is again something that the Stoic philosophers very clearly recognized. They said that if you practice laxity in your duty to judge external impressions aright and commit a mistake, it already weakens you. And the next time you are in a situation similar to this, your ability to even assess the external impression correctly will be undermined. So you go into a second time, a third time. By then this becomes a hard set habit. You have become a slave to that pattern and you have lost your ground altogether. And the same pattern of thought you will find in Jesus Christ as well. So let's be open to good insights, good understanding from every source. And I fully agree with Mahatma Gandhi, who said, let 1,000 windows open. Let good winds of wise thoughts come into us, into our life from all sources. Let's be rid of all these prejudices. Let's celebrate our shared humanity. Ultimately, there is only one God. We are all children of God. And as children of God, we have a duty to take care of the personality, incomparable in its beauty, its worth, its uniqueness, and hold on to that as the ultimate achievement possible on planet Earth. Thank you for your very patient listening, and I wish all of you a great day ahead. Thank you.